Maybe you're tuning in fresh for this 20-minute segment. If so, there's a part one. You should check it out. Maybe you're coming back after having experienced that already. So welcome back. We're going to dive into a section now where we're focusing on engaging our guests, assuming that we've come prepared and whatever it is we're walking into to greet guests, help folks understand how much they matter. How do we engage our guests? Practice number one, which if you're continuing is practice number 8, give them something to talk about. Give your guests something to talk about. Consider this. What experience do you want your guests to have? Another way to consider this would be, what do you want your guests to talk about the day after they experience whatever your experience is? It's a weekend service, it's a midweek gathering, it's a student event, whatever the event is, whatever's happening. What would you like to hear your guests say to their friends who weren't there about their experience? How do you define that? In fact, let's just make a list. Can we do some interaction here? Why don't you just tell me, what would you like to hear guests say after they experience whatever they experience with you? Go.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, that's helpful.
It was helpful. Friendly. Inviting. What else? Caring.
I'll go again.
I'll go back. That's awesome.
Comfortable.
It's comfortable.
Positive.
Anything else?
Refreshing.
Refreshing. That's a pretty good list. If our guest were to go and say that, how do we make that happen? See, the reality is that it's not as though your guest won't experience something. They will. The question is what? And if we don't decide in advance of the experience what they're going to experience, then we have no control over what they experience. I'd like to give them something to talk about. Something I want them to talk about. Like this. So how does that happen? It's going to mean that all of us are fully engaged. Every person's fully engaged. I remember some time ago, my wife and I were invited by a couple in our church to marry them at a destination wedding kind of deal. Happened to be Jacksonville, Florida, at the Sawgrass Marriott. So, as a good Christ-following pastor, I said, well, let me pray about that. I don't remember praying about that at all. I just assumed that the Holy Spirit led this couple to me to make the request, and that was a sign that it was a deal. So we made the trip with our friends, and we got to the Sawgrass Marriott and discovered that our accommodations were at a villa on the same campus, but away from the main building. The wedding was going to happen like the first day we were there. We'd have another 3 days or so together. And so we asked if we could be moved to the main building so we'd be near our friends, we could share a couple meals together, etc. So Steve comes over, bellhop Steve, comes over and gets our luggage, walks us over, across the campus, up the elevator, down the hallway to our new room. Well, as you can imagine, walking some distance, any distance at all, there's kind of natural conversation that goes on. So Steve learns, talking to my wife and I, that it's actually our anniversary, as well as we're there to help this couple get married. We come back to our room that night, and there was a marble slab of chocolate-covered strawberries, basket of fruit, some bubbly, with a note from Steve wishing us a happy anniversary. Now, to this day, when I talk about the Sawgrass Marriott, that's what I talk about. Not only that, I talk about Steve. When I say the Sawgrass Marriott provided personal service, when I say the Sawgrass Marriott is friendly, when I say the Sawgrass Marriott was a professional, relaxing, engaging weekend, I didn't talk to the president, didn't talk to the manager on site, I didn't talk to all the team members. I talked to Steve, one person, to this day, my impression of the brand, Sawgrass Marriott, is based on Steve. The reality is that when our guests go back and they have whatever conversation they have after this experience with their friends, when they say it was a friendly place, they're great people, they were engaging, I felt accepted, there's a really good chance that all those comments are being made based on one conversation with one individual from our church. That's amazing. That's powerful. And it's scary. Because if they talk to the right person, it's awesome. And if they didn't, oh my. Give them something to talk about. Next, it's important to be in the moment. We live easily in the past, thinking about what we did, the last experience, savoring the memory. We live easily, maybe even more so, in the future, thinking about what we still have to do, what we're going to next, what we have to plan for, get ready for, clean up for. We have a difficult time living, being present in the moment. And this is not just about church world, this is about life. It's tough, it's a challenge to be fully present in the moment. Think about the number of times when even conversations go on autopilot. You've listened, you've been engaged, it's a 4 or 5 minute conversation, and you realize they just wrapped up a story and you should remember more than the ending. But you have no idea because you weren't fully present in the moment. It's critical. We engage a guest, whatever that means. A guest approaches us, where's the restroom? We approach a guest because they look like they're new. They have questions, so they walk up to the info center. Whatever it is. Right now, right here, I'm with this person. And that's tough to do, especially in church settings. Because those kind of conversations happen at an information desk, in a hallway, in a lobby, which means it's not just the two of you in the hallway, in the lobby, in the atrium. There's like a bunch of people roaming around. And so there's a lot of stuff to steal our attention. Ever had this happen? You're talking to somebody, you're engaged, eye contact's happening. Someone walks behind the person you're talking to and goes, "Can I talk to you?" Really? Do you know that when you look over that person's shoulder you're talking to, a second time, a third time, a fourth time, they pick up on all that. And regardless how engaging your words might be, body language communicates, I'm out of here. I have something else that's more important, a different priority, I'm gone. Be fully present in the moment. Next, it's really important in doing so to bust up your party. Write those 4 words down. Bust up your party. Consider this. You walk into a store, any store, mall, retail, whatever. You walk into a retail store, and you need to know where the denim is. You're looking for jeans. You look over to your left, and there's a group of like 3 or 4 associates laughing, having a good time. I mean, they seem really friendly to each other. And they're having a great time. And you look over to the right, and there's another associate folding sweaters. Who will you approach to ask for directions to the jeans? Every time you'll go to this person, the single person, folding sweaters. Not because they look better, they seem nicer, but because this conversation over here is exclusive. I will interrupt this if I walk over here. I'm not interrupting anything over here. Big challenge. We love hanging with our friends at church. We love it. It's fun. It's right. But when we're serving, it's important to rank order these 2 conflicting values, community and serving our guests. Community, friendship, meeting people where they are. Rank order, around here on the weekends, for instance, first priority is guest. Second priority, community and friendship. Can they both coexist? Yes. But what it means is that when I'm standing with a volunteer or another staff member in the atrium on either of our campuses, and we're in a conversation, we're engaged with each other, we're standing shoulder to shoulder. We're not closing the conversation by facing each other, we're standing shoulder to shoulder, looking out, open, and in mid-sentence, one of us is likely to walk away. Not because we're bored, not because we're mad, not because we're rude, but because we saw a guest that we need to engage. And that takes priority. And so we just walk away. Boom, we're gone. And the other person understands the rank order, and so there's no offense. The value is the guest. That's where we live. Bust up your party. Next, never assume. Now, there are a couple of things at play here. It's easy to think we know what the guest wants. For instance, I was working with a church in Florida several years ago. I'll tell you what we know, and then I'll speculate a bit. What we know is that a guest walked in on a Saturday evening for service. We also know this was a Protestant church, and there's nothing on the campus of this church that suggests otherwise. But a guest walks through the front door Saturday night and makes a simple question to the greeter at the door. What time is your next Mass? The greeter said, we don't have Mass. And the guest said thank you and turned around and walked out the door, got back in her car and left. That's what we know. Now I'll speculate. What if the greeter had asked a question of this guest to make sure, as a greeter, they were hearing the question the guest was actually asking? Let me make sure I understand your question. Are you looking for Catholic Mass, Holy Communion, our next service time? How can I best help you? Speculating. I'm going to guess that the guest would have said, I don't know, whatever you call it, but what's the next time it starts? My guess is then the greeter could have said, it starts at 7 o'clock, you're here 15 minutes early. Hi, my name is, let me show you around. Never assume. And what's critical is that we live inside this church world bubble. And so our frame of reference is set by what we know about our environment, our building, our values. So when someone walks in and asks a question out of their context, we try to frame it inside of ours, and it doesn't match. And we assume that we know what they're asking, when actually we may not know. Second thing that's at play here is that it's easy for us to begin to act like used car salespersons. Now, let's relax. This is a caricature of a used car salesperson, but here's what it can look like. Used car lot, it's Monday morning, sales manager walks into the team and says, now listen, guys, gals, I don't care what you sell today, but we're selling the green Buick. Because every day the green Buick sits in our lot now, we're losing money. Somebody's selling the green Buick. It's your top priority, has to move, sell the green Buick. So, a couple hours later, single guy looking for his first car walks on the lot. I've got your car. Come check this out. It's a green Buick. Later in the day, single mom walks on the lot, looking for a car for work, transporters for your kids. Sweetheart, I've got your car. Come check out this green Buick. Later that evening, family of 4 walks on the lot, mom, dad, couple kids. Man, have I got your car. It's a green Buick. Come check this out. Because the salesman's working from his or her agenda. Doesn't matter the request, the need stated, inferred, implied by the customer. I'm moving the green Buick. Living inside our little bubble, the reality is we do have an agenda. We do want people to take a next step toward Jesus. We do want people to know Him personally. We do want people to follow Him as fully devoted followers. That's our agenda. We do have one. And we're not apologetic about it. However, if someone wants to know where the restroom is, my agenda doesn't matter. I just need to help them get to the restroom. So I can't assume that what they're asking is actually, they want all the info I need. So they ask a question about the service, and I go into a litany of stats about our attendance and our square footage of the building and how long our pastor's been here, and it doesn't matter because my agenda is not the point. Never assume. Next, Best practice, everyone is a host. Everyone's a host. Here's my point. Regardless what other label you carry, you're a host. So maybe you're a check-in facilitator for children. Maybe you direct traffic. Maybe you're a greeter. Maybe you're an usher. Maybe you're a front desk receptionist, whatever the role is. If you see yourself solely as a greeter, for instance, then once you greet, you're finished greeting. Everyone's in, I finished greeting, I'm done. Once you've directed traffic and you've parked cars, then you're done. Everyone's parked. Once you've ushed, you've ushed, you're done. Or are you? What if everyone, regardless of whatever other label we have, we just accepted we're host? And for whatever amount of time I'm here, it's on me to keep my eyes, ears, heart open to what's happening around me so I can address a need, meet a request, answer a question, be helpful to anybody as a host. What if everyone in the church, everyone in the organization behaved that way? Do you know what I'm often most impressed about a hotel? After the bed and the price and all that, is when I walk down a hallway to my room and I pass the housekeeping cart. And the person tending the cart, cleaning the rooms, looks up, makes eye contact with me and says, "Hi, how's everything today?" And I get that that person gets that they're a host. They're not just a housekeeping team. They don't assume the front desk staff is only responsible for guest services. They get that they're on the team. Everyone's a host, which should imply, by the way, that when you're not on and you just show up for service or whatever it is you're engaging, you're still a host. Because guests don't care whether you're on or not. They thought last week when you had a name tag on that you were the most engaging, personable, helpful individual they'd ever met. And then they passed you when you weren't wearing a badge and you were in your own little world and caring about your own little world, and you're still a host. Everyone's a host. Consider this. We should eliminate distractions, and here's one way to do that. Think one chance. Think one chance. This is really sad, but here's the deal. There are people who aren't in church today, who aren't following Jesus today, because 17 years ago they stopped going to First Baptist or First Nazarene or Central United Methodist, whatever the church. They stopped going to the church they were attending. What's sadder about that is they didn't just stop going to First Baptist. They stopped going anywhere. They didn't go back anywhere. The reality is we might only get one chance. The reality is that the initial impressions we make, how people feel valued in the first few minutes, even seconds, will determine for many people whether or not they return. We might only have one chance. Anybody have cable TV? I've been around and around. Every 6 or 8 months, I dialogue with the cable company. And it's interesting to me how many businesses forget the one chance. Forget that it just takes one. It only takes one failure, incident. I have other options. I can get a satellite on the roof if I want to. I have other choices. Other ways to spend my Sunday morning, other ways to, right? Places to send my kids. I have choices. Think one chance. Number 14, and this shouldn't have to be said, but I'm going to say it, get dressed. Now here's what I mean by that. In the history of leading, I've never experienced any team member showing up not dressed. It is important, however, to communicate what the expectation is for a dress. Because if you haven't communicated what the expectation is, then, wow, it's ugly. It's hard. Now, I discovered several years ago that as a male leading both men and women, that it's challenging to help everyone understand modesty. It's hard as a male to communicate to a woman, sweetheart, this is how high this should be and how low that should be and how loose that should probably be. And it's a hard conversation, and I'd like to not have them. And yet, a bunch of us still find ourselves having to have those conversations. So several years ago, it occurred to me that this just might be helpful. If a guest walks past you and they drop their program or a piece of paper or whatever, and you bend over to pick it up, everyone should still wonder. That's it. And my experience is that 99% of the women get that. But if you don't communicate it, then you have difficult choices. You have to go home. You can't serve today because often how we look can be a distraction. And it's not just about modesty. It's about, do I care about what I look like? Did I look in the mirror before I arrived? Do I look like I am ready to engage another person? Get dressed. Here's another distraction. We need to kill the rules. Because whether or not we want to admit it, most churches have rules. Expectations might be a softer, nicer way to say it in church world. We have expectations. We don't have any rules, but we have expectations. Now, the truth is, there are a bunch of churches that do have rules, like don't you dare use anything out of the cabinet labeled women's ministry in the kitchen. That's a rule. No running. Kids should not run in church. You shouldn't wear hats. You should wear a suit coat. There's no talking. There's no chewing gum. There's no cough in the auditorium or sanctuary. Churches have rules. Lots of rules. Here's the challenge I've discovered. Even if there is a fair expectation, if we don't define whether it's a rule that can't be broken or it's a rule that is in place for a smooth operation, then it'll always be enforced as a rule that can't be broken. For instance, years ago, on this Granger campus, we opened a new auditorium, and for a season, we had a rule. No bottled water in the auditorium. I'm sorry, back up. No coffee, only bottled water in the auditorium, only bottled water. So, at the same time we opened that new auditorium, we freed up where we had been meeting, space that got converted into a full-fledged, fully functioning cafe, where we served espresso drinks of all kinds. And we charged. So, I watched one morning in great dismay as a lady who just paid $3.75 for her drink walked toward the entrance to the auditorium, where a greeter had been trained by me, said to her, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we only allow bottled water in the auditorium. Just bought this from your cafe." She only had one line because I trained her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we only allow bottled water in an auditorium." To which the lady responded, "I can see my husband. He's like in the third row from the back on the aisle. I have a lid. I promise I won't spill it." In unison now, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we only allow bottled water in the auditorium." And I just went, oh, no. Because I didn't define, is this a rule that can't be broken? Or is this a rule that you ought to use your good judgment on? In fact, Nordstrom's department store, their handbook says this: use your good judgment in all situations. There will be no additional rules. I just want to say to all of you, honestly, you are empowered to use your good judgment in all situations. There are really no additional rules. In fact, Jesus started this whole deal. Nordstrom didn't. Jesus is the one who said, treat others the way you'd like to be treated. I think if you do that, we'll probably kill the rules and people will be valued where they are. Here are three more quick ways to add value to the guest experience as we engage them. First of all, remember that names equal value. Names equal value. Names set us apart. They identify us as unique. Even if there's someone near us with the same name, we have a middle name, a last name, there's ownership, identity inside of our name. And when others use it, it brings a great deal of value to us. Let me just ask you, how do you remember names? What techniques do you use? What do you practice? What do you do? Anybody?
Name tags.
Name tags. So that's one way. Everyone, where's a name tag? What else?
Use their name.
Use their name. If you can, in just a 2 or 3 minute conversation, repeat someone's name 2 times, 3 times appropriately. For instance, hi, Dennis. How are you, Dennis? Nice to meet you, Dennis. I'm glad you're here, Dennis. That would be obnoxious really fast. But when you repeat their name, it helps you lock it in. Somebody else? Association. I like to remind people that while this works, to use it with caution. My older sister's name is Debbie. And growing up, we called Debbie Bird Legs. She was tall, slender. In our family, it was an affectionate term. Well, if I meet somebody Debbie and I think, wow, this person's tall like my sister, Debbie, it'll help me. I have to be really careful that the next time I see this new Debbie, the only thing I think is Bird Legs. What else? What's her name? But it can be helpful. What else? Anything else?
Write it down.
Write it down. Here's the deal. Kim Volheim's the guy who just said, write it down. And here's what I know about Kim and watch Kim do. Kim's one of the most tech-savvy guys I know. Kim has an iMac, he has an iPad, an iPhone, and he uses them well. But on the weekends, in our services, Kim walks around with a pad of paper and a pen. Because he's learned that when he manually writes someone's name out, he doesn't stand in front of me and go, say that again. Spell that for me. If you'll hold, I'm going to sketch your face. He doesn't do that. But away from the conversation, he writes the name down, and manually doing so helps him block in the name better than typing it in his phone or his iPad. It's a great tool for him. Whatever you use, I often ask for a spelling of a name. So I met Tracy today. Tracy's that with a Y or an I. It helps me lock in the name because I see the spelling in my head. And whatever you can do, especially if not just at the end of the conversation, but an hour later, when the guest is leaving the experience, to be able to catch them and say, hey, Tracy, so glad you're here today. Names equal value. It's huge, 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 huge. You add value when you have fun. When you have fun, just have fun. I remember years ago when I was in retail, my district manager, I took a new store, district manager said, if you'll build this staff, which was nothing. I mean, I had 2 staff people, it was ridiculous, and Christmas was coming, I had a full staff to develop. He said, if you'll build a staff that doesn't just sell clothes, but who like each other, get along with each other, have fun with each other, then you'll never be short of staff. You'll never have to leave this store and have to go recruit someplace else. And he was right. A year and a half later, when the staff was all developed, it was a fun environment. Mall walkers would come in and spend a half hour just hanging out talking because they loved the environment. Customers ask me and my staff all the time, how can I join the team? Because I love what I see happening here. I'd love to work in a place with this environment. Fun is attractive. Fun says to guests, this is a great place. We like being here. We come back here. Because this is about relationships. And that's what's important. That's what matters. Finally, you got to create your own best practices. In this little 20-minute segment, there's a handful of best practices. There's a book with 101 best practices. But there are way more best practices. In fact, everything I've talked about in this session, the one prior, comes not from me, but from scores of volunteers at Granger Community Church and great leaders and teams of people across the country and other respective churches who have in their context, out of their wiring, their personality, their love for people, had an idea and said, what if? What if we provide a bag of goodies for a kid whose parents arrived late to the service and they can sit with their parents and color? And that was an idea from a volunteer. You have best practices, things that you're little nuances to how you engage people that if you shared, here's something I've learned. Or you noticed it in somebody else on your team. I watched this in Dennis. What if everybody did this? Establish your own best practices. Because first impressions, guest services, how we treat people is constantly evolving. It constantly has to be bumped up and to the right to be better and better so that people know that we really care. And we believe they have value. They matter to God and they matter to us. That's how we engage guests. That's how we help people know that they matter.